The siren came on suddenly, sharp, loud, unforgiving. Red and blue lights flooded the quiet residential street, slicing through the late afternoon calm like an accusation. Inside a weathered black sedan, Harold Whitman's hands tightened around the steering wheel. "Lord," he murmured under his breath. He was 72 years old, a retired high school history teacher, and in that moment, with the police lights screaming behind him, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Small. Slowly, carefully, Harold guided the car to the curb. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. He shut off the engine, rolled down the window, and placed both hands clearly on the steering wheel, exactly as he'd taught his students' parents to do when he was younger. The patrol car door slammed. Heavy footsteps approached. "License and registration," a voice barked. Not a greeting, not a question. Officer Daniel Reeves stood by the window, sunglasses on, jaw tight. He looked young, mid-30s maybe, clean uniform, confident posture. Impatient. Harold nodded once. "Of course, officer." His movements were slow. Arthritis didn't allow anything else. He reached toward the glove compartment, deliberately, announcing every motion the way caution demanded. "I'm just going to open this here." "I know how this works," Reeves snapped. "Just do it." Harold flinched, just slightly, but kept his voice calm. "Yes, sir." The glove compartment creaked open. Papers rustled. A thin, worn notebook slipped out and landed softly on the passenger seat. Reeves noticed it immediately. "What's that?" he demanded. Harold glanced at it. "Oh, that's just my notebook." Reeves didn't smile. "I didn't ask what you call it. I asked what it is." Harold swallowed. "It's personal." Reeves' lips pressed into a line. He didn't like that answer. "Registration," he said sharply. Harold handed it over, along with his license. Reeves took them, glanced once, then frowned. "You know why I pulled you over?" Harold shook his head. "No, sir." A rolling stop back there. "I'm sorry," Harold said quickly. "I truly didn't realize—" "Uh-huh," Reeves cut him off, already stepping back toward the patrol car. "Sit tight." The word "sit" stung more than it should have. Harold watched the officer walk away, shoulders tense. He exhaled slowly, staring straight ahead, reminding himself to breathe. He'd done nothing wrong. Still, his heart pounded. From the patrol car, Reeves ran the plates. Everything came back clean. No warrants, no flags, no priors. Yet Reeves didn't relax. He looked again at the old man in the sedan, the way he sat so stiffly, the way his hands never left the wheel. Too careful, too rehearsed. Reeves stepped out again, license still in hand. "Mr. Whitman," he said, tone clipped. "You live around here?" "Yes, sir. Just 2 blocks over. Been there 35 years. Reeves raised an eyebrow. "Uh-huh. And where are you coming from?" "The library." "The library," Reeves repeated flatly. "Yes, I volunteer there on Tuesdays." He leaned down slightly, peering into the car. His eyes flicked to the notebook on the seat again. "What do you keep writing down?" Harold hesitated. Reeves' voice hardened. "I asked you a question." Harold's fingers curled inward. "Names." Reeves straightened. "Names?" "Yes." "What kind of names?" Harold met his gaze now, tired eyes, steady, unafraid. "Former students." That gave Reeves pause, just a fraction of a second. "Why?" Harold took a breath. "Because I don't want to forget them." Silence hung between them. Then Reeves laughed, short, humorless. "You expect me to believe that?" Harold didn't answer. Reeves sighed, exasperated. "Step out of the vehicle." Harold's stomach dropped. "Officer, I haven't—" "Step out of the vehicle." Slowly, painfully, Harold opened the door and stepped onto the pavement. His knees protested. Reeves watched closely, hand hovering near his belt. "Hands where I can see them." Harold complied. Reeves circled the car once, then picked up the notebook, flipping it open without asking. Harold's voice cracked. "Please don't." Reeves stopped reading. Then he turned a page, then another. The mocking look faded from his face. Line after line filled the pages. Names, graduation years, small notes written in careful handwriting. First in family to attend college, joined the army, lost his father, needed extra help, became a nurse, taught Sunday school. Reeves swallowed. He flipped faster now. Dozens, then hundreds. Some names were circled. Some had stars beside them. And then he froze, because one name on that page was his. Daniel Reeves, class of 2006. Quiet, smart, needed encouragement, strong moral compass. The street went completely silent. Reeves stared at the page like it might disappear. Slowly, he looked up at the old man standing obediently by the curb. "You taught at Lincoln High?" Harold nodded gently. "Yes, for 42 years. Reeves' voice was no longer sharp. It was unsteady. "Yes, sir." And for the first time since the siren had sounded, something inside the officer shifted, not just his view of the man in front of him, but of himself.
Officer Daniel Reeves didn't realize he was holding his breath until his chest began to ache. The notebook felt heavier in his hands than it should have, not because of its size, but because of what it carried. Memory. He closed it slowly, as if snapping it shut too fast might erase what he'd just seen. "You taught at Lincoln High?" he repeated, quieter now. Harold Whitman nodded again. History, American civics, sometimes remedial reading when they needed someone patient. Reeves cleared his throat. The street suddenly felt exposed, too open, too public. I was class of 2006, Reeves said. "Didn't think you'd remember me." The faint smile tugged at the corner of Harold's mouth. Not pride, not triumph, recognition. "I remember all of you," Harold said softly. "That's why I write them down." Reeves glanced at the notebook again, then at the old sedan, then at the quiet houses lining the block. Curtains twitched somewhere. Neighbors always notice police lights. "Let's talk inside the car," Reeves said finally. "You can sit." Harold eased back into the driver's seat with a small grunt, joints protesting. Reeves stepped back from the door, a subtle but meaningful shift, and leaned against the car instead of looming over him. The siren was off now. The lights still blinked, but less aggressively. "How long have you been keeping this?" Reeves asked. Harold rested his hands in his lap. "Since my first year teaching, 1978. That's," Reeves shook his head, "that's almost 50 years. 46, Harold corrected gently. "I retired at 68. My wife said I should stop worrying about other people's children." Reeves smirked faintly. "Did you?" Harold looked at the notebook. "I tried." Reeves opened it again, slower this time. He wasn't scanning for threats now. He was reading. Each name carried a life. Each line was careful, respectful. No sarcasm, no bitterness. "Why write this stuff down?" Reeves asked. "Most teachers barely remember names after a few years." Harold chuckled quietly. "Because when you get older, people start pretending you were never there. I didn't want my students to feel that way." Reeves frowned. "What do you mean?" Harold's eyes drifted to the street ahead. "When I started teaching, boys like you," he paused, choosing his words, "didn't always have someone telling them they mattered. Some of you went home to silence, some to chaos. School was the only place someone said your name with respect." Reeves swallowed. "I wasn't a perfect teacher," Harold continued, "but I learned early that remembering a child's name can keep them alive long enough to become who they're meant to be." Reeves' jaw tightened. He flipped a few more pages. There were names crossed out. He pointed to one. "Why are some marked like this?" Harold's voice softened. "Those didn't make it." Reeves looked up sharply. Didn't make it? How? Drugs, violence, suicide, prison, sometimes just disappeared. Harold folded his hands. I mark them so I don't lie to myself about what we lost. Reeves closed the notebook again. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was heavy, reverent. Finally, Reeves spoke. I was not easy. Harold smiled. No, you weren't. Reeves let out a surprised laugh. I was angry all the time. My dad had just laughed. Mom worked nights. I barely passed. You passed because you were capable, not because I gave you anything. Reeves shook his head. You stayed after school with me. You talked me into applying for the academy. Harold tilted his head. You were meant to protect people. You just needed someone to say it out loud. Reeves looked away, eyes stinging. I don't always get it right, out here, on the job. No one does, but you stop to read. That counts. Reeves exhaled slowly. He glanced back at the patrol car, then at the notebook. I was wrong, he said finally, about how I approached this. Harold didn't gloat, didn't nod smugly. That happens. What matters is what you do next. Reeves hesitated, then asked, Why today? Why were you carrying this now? Harold's hands tightened slightly. Today was Marcus Hill's birthday. Reeves frowned. The name sounds familiar. He sat in the back row, big smile, loved baseball, died in 1999. He would have been 45 today. Reeves swallowed hard. I go to the library on birthdays, read the paper, write them down again, so they don't vanish. Reeves stared at the notebook with new eyes. This wasn't obsession, it was mourning. It was remembrance. It was duty. A car passed slowly, driver staring. Reeves noticed and stepped back, posture straightening. I'm going to clear this stop. No citation. Harold nodded. Thank you. Reeves hesitated. Sir, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret it? Reeves asked. All those years, all that emotional weight? Harold considered the question. No, regret is forgetting. I didn't forget. Reeves handed back the notebook, carefully, like something sacred. As Harold took it, their fingers brushed briefly. Reeves felt it then. Not authority, not power. Responsibility. Drive safe, Mr. Whitman, Reeves said quietly. You too, Officer Reeves. As the old sedan pulled away, Reeves stood there longer than necessary, watching it disappear down the block. He didn't turn the siren on right away. Instead, he sat in his patrol car, staring at his reflection in the windshield, thinking about names, thinking about who remembers whom, and wondering how many people he judged without ever opening the notebook first.
Officer Daniel Reeves thought the stop was over. Paperwork cleared, no citation, no further reason to stay parked on that quiet street. Yet his hands didn't move to start the engine. Instead, his eyes drifted back to the spot where Harold Whitman's old sedan had disappeared, and then, uninvited, to the notebook again. The names. They stayed with him. He tried shaking it off. He'd seen worse things on the job. Bodies, broken homes, children taken away in the middle of the night. A retired teacher with a memory book shouldn't have rattled him like this, but it had. Back at the precinct, the afternoon dragged. The hum of radios, the smell of burnt coffee, the low murmur of complaints and reports, all of it felt distant. Reeves sat at his desk, half listening as his partner, Officer Cruz, dropped into the chair beside him. You look like hell, Cruz said. Rough stop? Reeves hesitated. Not rough, just unexpected. Cruz raised an eyebrow. That's new for you. Reeves forced a smile. Pulled over an old guy, retired teacher, had a notebook full of names. Names? Cruz leaned back. Like suspects? No, Reeves said. Students. Cruz snorted. That's it? That's what's got you shook?
Reeves didn't answer. He logged into the system instead, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Cruz followed his gaze. "You running someone?" "Yeah," Reeves said quietly. "One name." He typed it in. Marcus Hill. The system churned for a second. Then the screen populated. Cruz leaned forward. "What are we looking at?" Reeves' throat tightened. Marcus Hill. Male. Age at death, 17. Cause, gunshot wound. Year, 1999. Location, Lincoln High School. Parking lot. Cruz let out a low whistle. Damn. Reeves stared at the details. 17. High school. Same school Harold taught at. Same year Harold mentioned. That's not all, Reeves muttered, scrolling. Witness statements, case notes, a grainy photo of a smiling black teenager in a varsity jacket. Status, unsolved. Cruz's expression shifted. Wait, that one? Reeves looked at him sharply. You know it? Everyone does, Cruz said. That case haunted the department for years. Kid got shot right after a football game. No arrests, no closure. Parents sued, protests, whole thing was a mess. Reeves' chest tightened. Harold had said he went to the library on Marcus's birthday. I pulled over Marcus's teacher today, Reeves said slowly. Cruz blinked. What? Harold Whitman, Reeves repeated. He taught him, wrote his name in a notebook, keeps going back to it. Cruz sat back, silent now. Reeves stared at the screen. Why would a retired teacher still carry that kind of weight? Because the system failed that kid, same way it failed a lot of them back then. Reeves closed his eyes. He'd been a junior that year. He remembered the lockdowns, the rumors, the fear in the hallways. He remembered teachers standing a little closer to students, like they could shield them with their bodies. He remembered Harold Whitman standing at the classroom door the next day, greeting every kid by name. You think Whitman knows something? Cruz asked carefully. Reeves shook his head. Not evidence, but memory. Cruz hesitated. You know what you're stepping into, right? That case is radioactive. Reeves opened his eyes. I know. But he couldn't unsee Marcus's photo. He couldn't unhear Harold's voice. I mark them so I don't lie to myself about what we lost. That evening, Reeves didn't go straight home. Instead, he drove past Lincoln High. The building hadn't changed much. Same brick facade, same chain-link fence around the parking lot. The spot where Marcus Hill was shot had been repaved years ago. No plaque, no marker. Just asphalt. Reeves parked across the street and sat there as the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange. A memory surfaced, one he hadn't touched in years. Marcus Hill laughing in the locker room, passing Reeves a towel, talking about a scholarship. Reeves hadn't been close to him, just acquaintances, hallway nods, shared classes. But now, Marcus was frozen at 17 forever, and Harold Whitman was still carrying him. Reeves' phone buzzed. You still thinking about it? Yeah. Be careful. Reeves didn't reply. Instead, he turned the car around and drove. Harold Whitman's apartment was modest, ground floor, clean but aging complex near the public library. Reeves hesitated before knocking. He wasn't on duty now. No warrant, no authority. Just a question he couldn't silence. The door opened slowly. Harold blinked in surprise. Officer Reeves? Reeves cleared his throat. Sorry to show up unannounced, sir. I had a question. Harold studied his face, then stepped aside. You'd better come in. The apartment smelled faintly of old books and lemon cleaner. Framed photos lined the walls, classrooms, graduations, smiling teenagers frozen in time. Reeves' eyes were drawn to one photo in particular. Marcus Hill, grinning, arms slung around Harold's shoulder.
You kept his picture, Reeves said quietly. I keep all of them, Harold replied. They sat at a small kitchen table. Reeves placed his hands flat on the surface. Marcus Hill's case is still unsolved. Harold nodded. I know. You go to the library on his birthday. Why? Harold folded his hands. Because someone should show up for him. Reeves swallowed. Did Marcus ever tell you he was afraid? Harold's eyes darkened. Yes, he did. The week before he died. Reeves leaned forward. Of what? Of a man who followed him home, Harold said softly. Of being targeted, of not being believed. Reeves' pulse quickened. Did he report it? I told him to, Harold said. He said the last time he tried, the officer laughed. Reeves felt something cold settle in his gut. Did you report it? He asked. I did. To the school, to the district, to the police. Reeves' jaw tightened. And? And nothing happened, Harold said calmly. That's why I write the names down. Reeves stared at the table. What was the man's name? He asked. Harold hesitated. Then he stood and walked to a shelf. He returned with the notebook. He opened it carefully, flipping pages until he stopped. There, under Marcus Hill's name, was another, underlined, written darker, not crossed out. A name Reeves recognized instantly. A name still in the system. A name that was supposed to be clean. Reeves' breath left him in a slow, stunned exhale. That's... His voice cracked. That's impossible. Harold met his eyes. That's what they told me too. The room felt smaller. The past pressed closer. And for the first time since putting on the badge, Officer Daniel Reeves understood something that would change him forever. Some cases don't stay unsolved because there's no truth. They stay unsolved because the truth is dangerous. Officer Daniel Reeves didn't leave Harold Whitman's apartment for a long time. He sat there, staring at the name written beneath Marcus Hill's, the one underlined, darker, deliberate, as if the ink itself might rearrange if he blinked hard enough. It didn't. The name stayed exactly where it was. A name Reeves had seen dozens of times in briefings, commendations, internal newsletters. A name attached to a man who'd climbed the department ladder with clean hands and a spotless reputation. Or so everyone believed. You're sure? Reeves asked quietly, though his gut already knew the answer. Harold Whitman didn't flinch. I've been sure for 25 years. Reeves leaned back, running a hand down his face. Why didn't you keep pushing? Why didn't you go public? Harold gave a tired smile. Because when a black teacher accuses a respected officer, the story doesn't become about truth, it becomes about credibility, and I knew exactly who would lose that fight. Reeves felt the words hit somewhere deep and uncomfortable. You still kept the name, Reeves said. I kept all of them, Harold replied. Some for remembrance, some for accountability. Silence stretched between them. You know what this means for me, Reeves said finally. Harold nodded. Yes. If I pursue this, I'm not just reopening an old case, I'm challenging the department, my own people. Harold met his gaze, steady and unflinching. Then you'll finally understand what my students learned early. Reeves frowned. What's that? That justice isn't automatic. It's a choice someone has to make every time. Reeves stood slowly. I can't promise you anything, but I can promise I won't forget this. Harold smiled faintly. That's how it starts. The precinct felt different when Reeves walked back in. Same fluorescent lights, same stale coffee, same radio chatter. But now every badge, every handshake, every friendly nod felt heavier, like he was seeing the place for the first time without the comfort of illusion. He logged into the system again, pulling up the old case file. Marcus Hill. The witness statements were thin, too thin. Timestamps didn't line up, patrol logs missing, a responding officer listed, but no follow-up notes. Reeves' jaw clenched. He cross-checked names. Then his chest tightened. The officer who'd responded that night, first on scene, was the same name from Harold's notebook. Now a captain. Now powerful. Reeves pushed back from the desk, heart pounding. Cruz noticed immediately. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Reeves lowered his voice. "I might have." Cruz followed him into an empty interview room, shutting the door behind them. Reeves spoke carefully. "If you found out a cold case was buried, intentionally, what would you do?" Cruz stared at him. "Depends who buried it." Reeves hesitated, then said the name. Cruz's face drained of color. "No way," he said immediately. "No way." "That was my reaction too," Reeves replied. Cruz ran a hand through his hair. "You're talking about ending your career. I'm talking about doing my job." Cruz scoffed. "That's the same thing in this department." Reeves didn't argue. "Listen," Cruz continued, "you bring this up the wrong way, you'll get shut down, or worse." "Then what's the right way?" Reeves asked. Cruz thought for a long moment. "You start with paper, quietly. You document everything. You protect yourself." Reeves nodded. "And the case? You don't touch it directly. Not yet. You find leverage." Reeves' phone buzzed. An email. Subject: Internal Review Request, Marcus Hill Case, 1999. His stomach dropped. He hadn't sent anything. "Did you?" Cruz started. "No," Reeves said, already standing. "Someone else did." By the next morning, whispers were already moving through the precinct. Old case. Internal review. Unnecessary. Dangerous. Reeves walked into roll call to feel eyes on him, curious, cautious, some openly hostile. Captain Lawson stood at the front, posture stiff, expression unreadable. "We've received a request to reopen historical case. Let me be clear, this department does not tolerate fishing expeditions or attempts to rewrite the past." Reeves felt the weight of the room shift. Lawson's eyes found his. "If anyone has concerns, they should bring them through proper channels, not notebooks, not rumors." The message was clear. After roll call, Lawson called Reeves into his office. The door closed with a quiet, final click. "You want to explain why my inbox is full this morning?" Lawson asked, folding his hands. Reeves kept his voice steady. "I haven't filed anything, sir." Lawson studied him. "But you pulled over a retired teacher yesterday." "Yes. And now a 25-year-old case is stirring." Reeves met his gaze. "That case was never settled." Lawson's jaw tightened. "It was closed." "Unsolved isn't the same as closed," Reeves replied. A beat of silence. "You're playing a dangerous game," Lawson said quietly. "Some things are left alone for a reason." "Because they're inconvenient?" Reeves asked. Lawson stood. "Because they tear departments apart." Reeves rose too. "Or because they protect the wrong people?" Lawson's eyes hardened. "You're on thin ice, officer." Reeves nodded. "I know." That afternoon, Reeves visited Lincoln High again. He walked the halls this time, slower. The walls were freshly painted, trophy cases updated, new faces everywhere. But echoes lingered. He stopped by the counseling office. An older woman behind the desk squinted at him. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for records from the late 90s, guidance reports, student concerns." She frowned.
Those were archived years ago. Where? Reeves asked. She hesitated. Basement storage. Why? Because a student asked for help and never got it. Something softened in her eyes. Wait here, she said quietly. She returned with a dusty box. Inside were files, handwritten notes, incident logs. And there it was. Marcus Hill. Complaint filed. Feeling followed. Threatened. Action taken. None. Reeves' hands trembled slightly. This wasn't memory. This was evidence. That night, Reeves couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table, the city quiet outside, the weight of two truths pressing in. The truth of what happened to Marcus Hill, and the truth of what it would cost to pursue it. He thought of Harold Whitman, still carrying names, still showing up. Reeves picked up his phone and typed an email to Internal Affairs. Attached, copies of the school records, patrol inconsistencies, witness notes. Subject, Internal Review Request, Marcus Hill Case, 1999. He hovered over send. This was the line. Once crossed, there was no going back. He thought of Marcus's smile, of Harold's notebook, of the badge on his chest. Reeves pressed send. The email whooshed away, and in that quiet kitchen, Officer Daniel Reeves understood something with terrifying clarity. Standing up wasn't heroic, it was lonely, and it was about to get much worse.
By morning, the pressure had already begun. Officer Daniel Reeves felt it the moment he stepped into the precinct, a subtle but unmistakable shift in the air. Conversations stopped just a beat too late. Laughter died mid-breath. Eyes followed him, then quickly looked away. It wasn't hostility yet. It was worse. It was caution. Reeves signed in, clipped his radio to his shoulder, and tried to move like everything was normal. But nothing was. He could feel it in his chest, like a storm building without thunder. At his locker, he found a folded note tucked between his boots. Be careful what you dig up. No signature, no threat spelled out, but the message was clear. Cruz approached a few minutes later, jaw tight. You poked the bear. Reeves didn't look surprised. How bad? Cruz lowered his voice. Internal Affairs opened a preliminary inquiry, unofficially. Reeves exhaled slowly. That was fast. Not really, Cruz replied. Someone tipped them off before your email even landed. Reeves frowned. You think Lawson? Cruz shrugged. Or someone who didn't like seeing ghosts dragged back into the light. Before Reeves could respond, Captain Lawson's voice cut through the room. Reeves, my office, now. The walk felt longer than usual. Lawson didn't offer a seat this time. I've reviewed your email, the captain said flatly. You've bypassed chain of command. I followed protocol for independent review, given the circumstances. Given your assumptions, Lawson interrupted. Reeves kept his voice steady. Given the evidence. Lawson stared at him for a long moment. You realize what this does to morale. Reeves clenched his jaw. What happened to Marcus Hill did that. Lawson's face hardened. This department doesn't need crusaders. It needs accountability, Reeves shot back. A beat of silence. You're reassigned, Lawson said finally. Administrative duties, effective immediately. Reeves felt the words land like a physical blow. Desk work? He asked. Until further notice, Lawson replied. Badge stays, gun stays, but you won't be touching cases. Reeves nodded once. Understood. As he turned to leave, Lawson added quietly, You should have let sleeping dogs lie. Reeves paused at the door. Some dogs don't sleep, they just wait. The reassignment spread fast. By lunchtime, Reeves's name was already being whispered in corners of the precinct. He's trouble. He's trying to make a name for himself. He doesn't know when to stop. Only Cruz still spoke to him openly. You're being isolated, Cruz said over burnt coffee in the break room. Classic move. I expected worse, Reeves replied. Give it time. That afternoon, Reeves received an email from Internal Affairs. Request for interview. Officer Daniel Reeves. No pleasantries, no explanation, just a date and time. Meanwhile, across town, Harold Whitman felt the shift too. A former colleague stopped returning his calls. A familiar car idled too long outside his apartment. The principal at Lincoln High asked, politely but firmly, that he stop visiting the campus. "They don't want me digging," Harold muttered, staring out his window. He opened his notebook again. The names stared back, some crossed out, some circled, some still untouched. For the first time in years, Harold added a new note beside one name: Officer Daniel Reeves, trying. The Internal Affairs interview room was small and windowless. 2 investigators sat across from Reeves, expressions unreadable. Why now? Why reopen a case this old? Because the truth doesn't expire, Reeves replied. They slid documents across the table, his emails, patrol logs, even his traffic stop footage with Harold. "You are aware how this looks. A routine stop turns into an accusation against a respected officer. Accusation backed by evidence," Reeves countered. The first investigator leaned forward. "You understand the implications if you're wrong." "I do," Reeves said, "but I also understand the cost of staying quiet." They exchanged glances. "This department has procedures. We don't act on feelings." Neither did Marcus Hill, and he ended up dead. The room went silent. Word of the inquiry leaked by evening. A local blog picked it up, then a radio station. By nightfall, the headline was everywhere: "Officer questions 1999 shooting, department under scrutiny." Reeves's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Supportive messages, angry ones, warnings disguised as advice. One voicemail stood out. Low voice, careful tone. "Some things are buried for a reason. Walk away." Reeves deleted it. At home, he sat alone, staring at his badge on the table. He thought of why he joined the force, not for power, not for praise, but because he believed the badge meant something. Now he wasn't sure who else still did. The next morning, he was served papers. Formal notice, internal review pending. He was officially under investigation. Crews found him in the hallway, eyes grim. "They're circling wagons." Reeves nodded. "Then we're close." Crews hesitated. "You sure you want to keep going?" Reeves thought of Marcus Hill, of Harold Whitman, of the notebook. "Yes," he said, "now more than ever." That night, a package appeared at Reeves's door. No return address. Inside was a USB drive and a single note: "If you're serious, watch this." Reeves plugged it into his laptop. The video was grainy, old. Body cam footage, not from 1999, but from a few years later. The same officer, the same pattern, the same quiet intimidation. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a habit. Reeves sat back, heart pounding. The truth was bigger than one case, and the system knew it, which meant it would fight harder. Reeves closed his laptop, knowing one thing with chilling certainty: there was no turning back now. The backlash didn't come all at once. It crept in. It settled into Daniel Reeves' life like a fog, quiet, suffocating, impossible to ignore. By the time the sun rose the next morning, his name was everywhere, not just in news headlines, but in comment sections, police group chats, radio call-ins, and whispered conversations at gas stations and grocery stores. Some called him brave. Others called him a traitor. Most didn't care about the truth at all. They just chose a side. Reeves stood in line at a coffee shop near his apartment, wearing plain clothes now that he was reassigned. The barista's smile faltered when she saw his name on the credit card. "You're that officer," she said cautiously. Reeves nodded once. "I am." She hesitated, then slid the cup toward him. "For what it's worth, my dad was stopped like that. A lot." Reeves swallowed. "I'm sorry." She met his eyes. "Thank you for not pretending it didn't happen." Behind him, someone scoffed loudly. "Bet he just wants attention," a man muttered. Reeves didn't turn around. He walked out with his coffee cooling in his hand and the familiar weight settling back into his chest. At the precinct, the distance grew sharper. Officers who once joked with him now kept their heads down. Others stared openly, daring him to say something. Locker room conversations went silent when he entered. One officer brushed past him deliberately, shoulder-checking him hard enough to sting. "Watch yourself," the man muttered. "Snitches don't last long." Cruz caught up to him later, eyes blazing. "You okay?" "Fine," Reeves lied. "You don't look fine." "They want me uncomfortable," Reeves said. "Means it's working." Cruz exhaled slowly. "They're talking about suspending you, without pay." Reeves froze. "On what grounds?" "Conduct unbecoming," Cruz said bitterly. "Translation, embarrassing the department." Reeves shook his head. "So truth is unbecoming now." "Always has been," Cruz replied. The pressure wasn't just professional. That afternoon, Reeves' landlord called. "I got a complaint," the man said awkwardly. "Neighbors say reporters keep showing up. I can't have that kind of attention." "You're evicting me?" Reeves asked flatly. "I'm asking you to consider other arrangements." Reeves hung up, staring at the wall. He thought of Harold Whitman, living quietly, carrying his memories alone for decades. Now Reeves understood the cost of speaking. Harold's felt it too. A man from the district office visited him under the guise of a wellness check. "Mr. Whitman, you've been very active lately," the man said, eyes scanning the apartment. Harold smiled politely. "Retirement leaves time for reflection." The man nodded. "Sometimes reflection stirs things better left alone." Harold's smile faded. "Sometimes it's the only thing that keeps us human." After the man left, Harold locked the door and leaned against it, heart racing. He opened his notebook again. The names felt heavier now. Dangerous. But he'd carried them this long. He wasn't about to stop. That night, the backlash went viral. A national commentator took aim on primetime television. "Let's be honest," the host sneered. "This officer is undermining public trust. Digging up decades-old incidents doesn't help anyone." Another panelist nodded. "It's a distraction, and frankly, irresponsible." Reeves watched from his couch, jaw clenched. They never mentioned Marcus Hill's name. Never mentioned the family. Never showed the footage. It was easier to talk about discomfort than accountability. His phone buzzed non-stop. One message stood out, from an unknown number. "You are ruining good men's lives. Stop before you get hurt." Reeves deleted it, but his hands trembled. The department's union released a statement the next day. "We stand by our officers and oppose reckless accusations that damage morale and public confidence." Reeves read it twice. Not a word about truth. Not a word about justice. Just protection. At the same time, protesters gathered outside the precinct. Some held signs demanding answers. Others waved flags and shouted insults. "Traitor! Cop hater! Go work somewhere else!" The divide was no longer quiet. It was loud, ugly, unavoidable. Inside the Internal Affairs office, Reeves faced investigators again. This time, the tone was colder. "We've reviewed additional footage," one said. "Where did you get it?" "It was sent anonymously," Reeves replied, "but it's authentic." "Or selectively edited," the other countered. Reeves leaned forward. "You know it's real." Silence. "We're recommending temporary suspension," the first investigator said, "pending further review." Reeves nodded slowly. "Without pay?" "Yes." There it was, the punishment disguised as procedure. As he stood to leave, one investigator spoke quietly. "You should think about your future." Reeves paused. "I am." Suspended, unemployed, and under scrutiny, Reeves walked out of the building for the last time, at least for now. The badge felt heavier clipped to his belt. Outside, reporters shouted questions. "Officer Reeves, are you anti-police? Do you regret speaking out? Is this about race?" Reeves stopped, turned, looked straight into the cameras. "This is about truth," he said calmly, "and whether we're brave enough to face it."
Then he walked away. That night, he sat alone in his apartment, boxes half packed in case the eviction notice came through. He replayed the body cam footage, the notebook pages, the names. He wondered if it was worth it. Then his phone rang. Harold. "I saw the news," the older man said. "They're trying to break you." "It feels like it," Reeves smiled faintly. "They tried to break me too for years, but here we are." Reeves closed his eyes. "I won't stop." "I know," Harold said, "and you won't stand alone much longer." "What do you mean?" "I mean, others are watching, and some are remembering." As if on cue, an email notification popped up on Reeves' screen. Another message, another attachment, another name stepping out of the shadows. Subject, "You're not the only one." Reeves opened it and realized the backlash had done something unexpected. It had awakened voices that had been silent for decades. The system had pushed back, hard, but it had also cracked. And through that crack, the truth was beginning to pour.
The emails didn't stop. They came in waves, quiet at first, then overwhelming, as if something long buried had finally cracked open and could no longer hold its breath. Daniel Reeves sat at his small kitchen table, laptop glowing in the dim light, coffee long gone cold. Every new message felt heavier than the last, not because of what they accused him of, but because of what they confirmed. Names, dates, badge numbers, voices that had waited decades for someone to listen. One email came from a woman in Ohio who wrote about her brother, a Vietnam veteran pulled over in 1981 and never treated the same afterward. Another came from a retired bus driver in Mississippi who recognized a name from Harold Whitman's notebook and attached a yellowed newspaper clipping as proof. The stories weren't identical, but the pattern was. And patterns were the one thing police training drilled into you from day one. Reeves rubbed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a history. Harold Whitman sat at his own table across town, the notebook open in front of him, hands folded as if in prayer. For the first time in years, the silence in his apartment didn't feel heavy. It felt expectant. His phone buzzed. A voicemail. He pressed play. "Mr. Whitman, my name is Elaine Porter. My father taught history in Alabama. I found your name in his journals. He wrote about you, about what happened in '72. He never stopped believing the truth would matter someday." Harold's breath caught. Someone remembered. Someone had written it down. He pressed his palm flat against the notebook, grounding himself. "Ruth," he whispered to his late wife, "they're finally listening." By the third day, Reeves' inbox had grown into a digital archive. He printed everything, lined the papers across his living room floor. Connections emerged. Officers who transferred departments shortly after complaints, supervisors who quietly retired after medical leave, settlements sealed under non-disclosure agreements. This wasn't about one bad stop. It was about a culture, a machine, and machines didn't stop on their own. Cruz came by that evening, shutting the door behind him quickly. "You need to see this," he said, pulling out his phone. On the screen was a leaked memo from inside the department. "R.E. Officer Reeves, monitor all contact, limit access." "They're tracking you," Cruz said. "Phones, emails, maybe worse." Reeves nodded slowly. "Then we move smarter." "You still trust me?" Cruz asked. "With my life," Reeves replied. Cruz exhaled. "Good, because internal affairs isn't the only one watching. Federal oversight just requested files." Reeves' eyes snapped up. "Federal?" "Civil Rights Division, quietly for now." Something shifted in the room. For the first time, the pressure didn't feel one-sided. Across the city, a small group gathered in a church basement. Teachers, retired postal workers, former students, all black,
all older, all holding memories they'd learned to keep quiet. Harold stood at the front, notebook in hand. "I never planned to be here," he said softly. "I just wrote things down so I wouldn't forget who I was." A man raised his hand. "You saved my cousin's name." A woman wiped tears from her eyes. "My mother taught at your school. She said you were the bravest man she knew." Harold shook his head. "I was just tired of being afraid." Silence followed. Then applause. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, honest. The next morning, the story broke nationally, not as an opinion piece, as an investigation. A major paper published an exposé titled "The Notebook: How One Traffic Stop Uncovered Decades of Silence." Harold's face appeared on the front page. So did Reeves. The article named names, cited documents, included timestamps. It was meticulous, impossible to dismiss. The department responded within hours. A press conference was announced. Chief Morrison stood behind the podium, jaw tight. "We take these allegations seriously, but we caution against jumping to conclusions based on anecdotal evidence." A reporter interrupted. "Sir, these aren't anecdotes. They're corroborated records." Morrison hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Reeves watched the broadcast from Cruz's couch. His phone buzzed again. Another message, this one short. "I was there. I'll testify." Then another. "I've waited 40 years. Tell me where to go." Reeves closed his eyes. The names were no longer alone. That night, someone followed him home. Reeves noticed the car 3 blocks back, headlights steady, pace deliberate. He took a sudden turn. So did the car. Another turn, still there. His pulse quickened, but his voice stayed calm when he called Cruz. "Not paranoid. I'm being tailed." "Don't go home," Cruz replied instantly. "Come to my place." Reeves changed direction again. The car slowed, then peeled off. Gone. A warning. Harold received his own warning the next day. An envelope slipped under his door. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of his notebook page, one name circled in red. Under it, a single sentence. "Some stories end badly." Harold sat down slowly. His hands shook. Then he stood, walked to the window, opened it, and placed the notebook in full view on the sill. Let them see. The turning point came quietly. A former officer, white, retired, respected, stepped forward publicly. "I was there. I saw what we did and what we didn't do." His confession cracked the wall wide open. Within days, more followed. Testimony piled up, investigations expanded, federal subpoenas were issued. The machine began to grind against itself. Reeves stood beside Harold on the courthouse steps as protesters gathered, not in anger this time, but in solidarity. Signs read, "We remember. The names matter. Truth doesn't expire." Harold squeezed Reeves' arm. "You changed the ending." Reeves shook his head. "You wrote the beginning." They stood together as the doors opened, as history walked in behind them.
The courtroom was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that pressed against your chest and reminded you that something irreversible was about to happen. Harold Whitman sat in the front row, hands folded over his worn notebook, spine straight despite his age. The wood of the benches creaked as people shifted behind him. Reporters, families, former students, retired officers, and men and women who had carried old wounds into this room, hoping, finally, to lay them down. Daniel Reeves stood near the aisle, uniform crisp, badge polished, heart pounding harder than it ever had during a foot chase or a weapons call. This was different. This was permanent.
When the judge entered, the room rose as one. And when everyone sat back down, history leaned forward. The prosecution began with facts, dates, locations, internal memos, settlements sealed away for decades. But facts alone didn't silence the room. Stories did. One by one, witnesses took the stand. A retired truck driver whose license had been revoked after a stop that never should have happened. A grandmother who lost her job after being falsely cited for resisting. A former cadet who had quit the force after being told, "That's just how things are done." Each testimony landed like a stone in water, ripples spreading outward. Harold listened without interruption, eyes steady, notebook resting on his knees. Every few minutes he turned a page, not to read, just to remind himself it was real. When Daniel Reeves was called to testify, the room stiffened. The defense tried to paint him as emotional, inexperienced, influenced by public pressure. "Officer Reeves," the attorney said smoothly, "isn't it true you violated protocol by engaging in a prolonged conversation during that traffic stop?" Reeves met his gaze. "I followed protocol. I treated a citizen with dignity." "Isn't it also true that you allowed personal feelings to cloud your judgment?" He didn't hesitate. "No. What clouded my judgment was realizing how long we'd been trained not to see." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge raised a hand for silence. Then Harold was called. He rose slowly, adjusting his jacket, walking to the stand with measured steps. When he placed the notebook on the witness table, the sound echoed. A simple thud, but it carried weight. "Mr. Whitman," the prosecutor said gently, "why did you keep this notebook?" Harold cleared his throat. "So I wouldn't forget. And so someday, someone else wouldn't be able to pretend they didn't know." The defense tried. They questioned his memory, his motives, his age. Harold listened patiently, then spoke again. "I taught history for 40 years, and I learned something important. Silence is not neutral. It chooses a side." The courtroom was still. Even the stenographer paused. The verdict didn't come that day, or the next, but when it did, it landed hard. Multiple officers were charged, several supervisors were stripped of pensions, federal oversight was ordered, records were unsealed. Not everything was fixed, but nothing could be buried again. Outside the courthouse, the crowd waited. When the doors opened and the news spread, something unexpected happened. There was no cheering, no shouting, just people holding each other, crying, nodding, breathing, as if a weight they'd carried for decades had finally been acknowledged. Weeks later, Daniel Reeves turned in his resignation, not quietly, not in anger, but with purpose. At a press conference, he spoke plainly. "I became an officer to protect people. If that means stepping away from a system so it can change, then that's still service." He accepted a position teaching ethics and procedure at the academy, training the next generation, teaching them what he wished he'd known sooner. Harold returned to his classroom, not as a full-time teacher, but as a guest. Schools invited him to speak. Universities asked for lectures. Students lined up afterwards to shake his hand. One asked him, "Did you know it would matter?" Harold smiled softly. "No," he said. "I just knew it should." One afternoon, months later, Harold sat on his porch with Daniel Reeves, the notebook resting between them on a small table. The sun dipped low, painting the street in amber. "You ever think about that night?" Reeves asked. "Sometimes," Harold replied, "but not the way I used to." Reeves nodded. "Me neither." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Harold slid the notebook across the table. "I want you to have it," Reeves said. Reeves's eyes widened. "I can't," Harold interrupted. "You should. Because stories don't belong to one person. They belong to whoever is brave enough to carry them forward." Reeves swallowed, then placed his hand on the cover. "I promise," he said. "I won't let it close." Harold smiled. "That's all I ever wanted." The next morning, a retired teacher walked past a police cruiser and nodded. The officer nodded back. A small thing, but real. And sometimes that's how change begins. Not with sirens, not with force, but with a name written down. And someone finally willing to read it.